Hello, fellow book readers. My name is John, and today I want to talk about some of my favorite antagonists in fantasy. I have 24 of them written down. They're not going to be in any particular order, but I just want to talk about some of the villains that really either scared me or that I really either wanted to lose really badly, but really kept me turning the page. Now, let's start with Tolkien, because I think he has some very interesting antagonists in like all three of his major works. And starting with the Silmarillion, we got Melkor or Morgoth. They're the same person. They just have two different names. And he's basically just the devil. That's what he is. He's largely has the same story as the biblical Satan does in the Bible. And I think it's very interesting because he doesn't feel human. Uh, and I think Tolkien does a very good job of that. And you don't see him on the page all that much, but when you do see him, he is pretty terrifying. And just like basically the incarnate of evil. Like he wasn't born to be evil, but he turned evil and he is evil. And he has some like big scenes that are just like really scary, like especially his fight versus Fingolfin, where he's described as being basically as tall as a mountain. Yeah, terrifying antagonist. I think he's written extremely well. And then we go to the Hobbit, and in the Hobbit we got Smog. Smog is a great antagonist. Uh, he is the antagonist that a lot of dragon antagonists are like still based on. He has some great like lines when he actually talks in The Hobbit. His design is awesome. You can go look at Tolkien's painting of him. He looks amazing, and he's a dragon, which it makes it like very interesting to read, but also like terrifying at the same time. But then in Lord of the Rings, the answer is not going to be what you expect. It's not Sauron, who's just like never on the page. For me, it's Saruman. I think Saruman is a great villain because unlike Morgoth, who's like very simple and easy to understand, not a very complex villain, Saruman is pretty complex. And it's like, why is he actually doing these things? And like digging in and finding out why he's actually evil is like very interesting. It's like, well, he's not actually evil. He's just kind of power hungry. But why is he power hungry? And I find his chapters in Lord of the Rings to be super easy reads and super fun and super like intriguing to dig deep into. And when I say his chapters, I just mean the chapters he's in. He's not actually a point of view character in that story. Next up, we really got to talk about like the first fantasy novel that I read, the first like antagonist that really jumped out to me on the page, and that would be Lord Voldemort from the Harry Potter series. Now he's another one who is just kind of evil for like no reason, basically. Like he just wants immortality and he thinks he's better than everybody and he thinks wizards should rule. So his story is like very simple, but at the same time he's terrifying and frightening, and he's like the perfect villain for the middle grade section of Harry Potter and then the young adult section of Harry Potter, where he actually shows up and you get to see him, and he's more like violent and dangerous and monstrous than ever. A very scary villain. And the way he's described with the red eyes and like the snake-like features, I think is perfect. Next, I want to talk about like two sort of prince characters here. And the first I'm going to talk about is from the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb, the first trilogy in the Realm of the Elderlings, and that is Regal Farseer. And what I find interesting about Regal Farseer is that he is basically a Saturday morning cartoon villain. And if you know what that means, you know what it means. If you don't, it's basically just he's like outrageous. He's like an outrageous villain. Uh, and the fact that nobody can see him being evil is like hilarious because of how like obvious and outrageous he like announces his plans. Like it wouldn't surprise me if there's like a dark castle behind him and lightning is striking the top of it. And that doesn't sound like good. Like it sounds like, oh, this is like terrible writing. But it's like, no, Robin Hobb really leans into it, I feel like, intentionally. And I think it really works. And then, of course, we got to go to A Song of Ice and Fire, and that's Joffrey Baratheon. Right away, you can tell he's just not good. He's sadistic, he's cruel, he's mean. And why is he this way? We don't really know because he's not a point of view character. But it's fascinating to read between the lines, reading what other people are saying about him and talking about him and reading about his upbringing. And I think there's some layers there. He's not like overly complex in the end. He's just like the sadistic, cruel prince. But there's definitely layers there. And whenever he's on the page, it's like you're rooting for him to fall. I think George did like a very good job with that. I know he says he writes morally great characters, but some characters he writes are just plain out antagonists, and Joffrey's one of them. And we're going to talk about the next one next. That would be Cersei Lannister, who has way more layers than Joffrey does. She's one of the more complex antagonists I've ever read. I wouldn't necessarily call her a villain. I would call Joffrey a villain, but Cersei is definitely an antagonist because all antagonist means is that she opposes the protagonist, and she does that. And she has her own reasons for doing so that in her head she's twisted to be right. But I do enjoy the layers behind it and how other characters view Cersei. Because some view her as like this well to go person, this good person, but most people don't. And she thinks she's a lot more competent than she actually is. I just think she's written extremely well, and I like how she's not a point of view character for the first three novels. So she's actually not on the page that much. So you see other people talking about her, and then when she is on the page, it is frightening because through her calmness, you can tell there's just like terror. You can just tell there's like meanness underneath it all. And then she is a point of view character in A Feast for Crows, and getting inside her head is frightening. And that next, I want to talk about a character who is like Cersei Lannister, and that is Gormflaith from the Gale Song trilogy by Shauna Lawless. She is basically a carbon copy of Cersei Lannister in terms of like her motivations in life and why she is doing these wicked things she is doing. She has a lot of the same qualities that Cersei does. The difference is she's a point of view character throughout all three of the novels, and she has magic, so she's actually like strong too, and just a fascinating read. And she's a lot of people's favorite character in the trilogy. For me, she's not. I'm still rooting for the protagonist, which is Fafa. Gormflaith is very clearly the antagonist of that trilogy, and I don't understand why anybody roots for her. But I do think she is a fascinating read, and like makes the books kind of addicting to go back to because you're just waiting for her to lose. Okay, next I want to talk about the First Law series, and the one antagonist I want to talk about from this series is Baez, the first Magi, and I think Joe Abercrombie did a really fantastic job with this because you don't actually know he's an antagonist right away. And he seems like this wise mentor character, but he hides all of his plans behind it. And I think he's sort of charismatic that way, but not traditionally charismatic. It's a sort of a different kind of charismatic. And he's a very interesting read because he's obviously very powerful, but you don't actually see him do all that much. But he's also like super easy to root against because he's clearly planning against some of our fan favorite characters, and we realize this. And I just think he's written extremely well. I hate him. I hate him so much, and I can't wait to see him lose. Let's talk about the Nightbringer from Ember in the Ashes. The Nightbringer has one of the best stories in the book series, and I think his character helps carry the best book in the series, the third book. His story is just so gut punching and impactful to me, and the backstory around the character is super interesting too. But he's also clearly evil and crazy and deranged, and oh man, it very complex villain. If you're looking for a villain that isn't super simple, the Nightbringer is there, and he's just a wonderfully written character. Sabata here did a great job with that antagonist. Next, I gotta talk about one of my favorite series. That's Throne of Glass. I think there's two standout antagonists in that series, and that one would be Arabin, who is basically just like this groomer, manipulative, sort of charismatic person, but he's also selfish, power hungry, and crazy. And some of the things he does in this book series are just like downright terrible. Like some of the worst things I've seen done by any antagonist on this list. And the second character, obviously, I talk about Maeve. Maeve has just like a super interesting backstory and frightening character. And I don't think she's as simple as some people think she is. But yeah, some of the things she does again are just super sadistic and just very easy to root against antagonists. And that's what I really judge an antagonist on is like how easy is it to root against them? And I think those two are just super easy to root against. Okay, next we gotta talk about like two different terrifying antagonists. And the first one I want to talk about is the Jackal from the first three Red Rising books. I haven't read past Morningstar, so please no spoilers for after Morningstar regarding other possible antagonists. But the Jackal, he reminds me of the Joker from Batman. Like he's just the Joker with like a definitive backstory. Because you know how the Joker has all these different backstories depending on which comic you read or like which film you watch. The Jackal has a very definitive backstory, but otherwise he's pretty much the same, like personality wise, as the Joker. That's who he reminds me of, and I think that's really well done. Super easy to root against. And the second one I want to talk about is a Stephen King antagonist. That would be Randall Flagg from Eyes of the Dragon. I think he's also in the Dark Tower series. Yeah, this villain was terrifying. That's the only word I can use to describe him. Absolutely terrifying, super demented. Leave it to Stephen King to come up with a character like Randall Flagg. Next, I want to talk about an antagonist that helped like carry a trilogy. Really was like the standout character in a trilogy. That's pretty rare. Usually, you need a good protagonist to have like a good antagonist to carry a series. But this wasn't really the case in this series. And that would be Shadow and Bone, the Darkling. The Darkling's the best character in that trilogy. I don't really think it's debatable. But at the same time, he's not a protagonist. He's not even like a Shades of Grey character. He's an antagonist, and he's very easy to root against because of how sadistic and cruel he is. But also, he is super charming and charismatic at the same time, and kind of dark and mysterious. And combine all three of those together, and it just makes for a very interesting read. You know what we haven't really done yet? A cowardly antagonist. I think that's definitely a trope and definitely a harder to write in terms of like making him super memorable. But I have one for this list, and that's Lancelot from the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. This is his King Arthur series, and he just makes Lancelot into a straight antagonist in this book series. But he's a different Lancelot. He's not super strong. He's not a great warrior. He's not even a good warrior. He is a coward. But he's also, super manipulative, and he thinks he's better than everybody. It's perfect, perfect, perfect antagonist. So easy to root against. He's a giant weasel. I haven't done enough middle grade antagonists on this list, so let's talk about one that I think is an easy standout, and that would be the White Witch from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the first book in the Chronicles of Narnia series by C.S. Lewis. Is there ever been a character that's more easy to root against than the White Witch? She's just basically evil personified. And evil personified, I know is a simple thing, but when it works, it works. And it worked in this novel. Super easy to root against character. And I love the atmosphere around her, how it's always like snow and stuff. It was perfect. I can't believe I waited this long to talk about the Wheel of Time, but we got to talk about my favorite Forsaken, Lanfear. Robert Jordan wrote a fantastic antagonist in Lanfear. I think she's the best Forsaken. I think she has the most interesting backstory by far. I think her motivations are a bit more complex than the other Forsaken, and I really enjoyed her as a character. Whenever she popped up, it was always like interesting chapters to read, and then you can go back and reread the series and see like when you don't know she's Lanfear yet, and it's like also just perfect. It makes those chapters a lot better. Yeah, just a great character. We haven't done enough monster type antagonists on this list, and I gotta do one now. Chernobog in Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. He's just this fire monster, but he's also just like kind of charming at the same time in the earlier parts of the novel, and yeah, just a terrifying monster at the end. Just super, super terrifying. Very easy to root against. It's another one that's just kind of evil incarnate, and I think that really works sometimes, and it worked here. Let's go on to the next antagonist. I don't think it's talked about enough in the early Stormlight Archive books. Sadeas helps carry the plot, the antagonist. He is sort of a minor antagonist in the grand scheme of the Stormlight Archive, but in those first two books, he is such a power hungry weasel, super easy to root against. The worst, just the worst type of person. Somebody that you would never want to be friends with in real life. Okay, next up, let's talk about a character that's a little bit Shades of Grey, because we haven't really done that yet, but definitely an antagonist still, and that is Holland from A Darker Shade of Magic. So in the first book in A Darker Shade of Magic, Holland is the antagonist. He's the person that opposes the protagonist, and he is powerful and mysterious and stern, and I think he's just a really great antagonist. Now, obviously, spoilers, stuff happens the rest of the series, and he's not really much of an antagonist anymore. But the first book, he's a major antagonist, even though he's kind of still Shades of Grey at the same time. Next, I want to talk about Ait Madashi from the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Late. She's the main antagonist in that series, and she's really not on the page that much. Now, she does make appearances in the books. It's not like she's absent like Sauron, but she isn't on the page all that much. But I still think she's a spectacular antagonist because even when she's not on the page, you can feel her presence. You can feel how threatening she is. You can see her intelligence. It's all there, and when she is on the page, the power just radiates off her. She's a really great antagonist, super easy to root against because of the things that are going on to our protagonist, basically because of her. Let's talk about someone who's just another like evil incarnate, basically, because I don't think those type of protagonists get enough love. I think a lot of people think they're too simple, but I think they're just like very easy to root against. And the one I want to talk about is from A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. King Fisher, Evangeline, the mother, just like straight up an evil witch mom, like the perfect antagonist. And there's no excuses made for it. We don't get to really learn much about her backstory. She's just evil. And it works. Frighteningly evil, too. Some of the descriptions about her are terrifying. Really great antagonist. Thought she kept the book very interesting for our protagonists. And we're going to close out this list by talking about one more antagonist, and that's the antagonist from Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, and that would be the Lord Ruler. He is the antagonist in the first Mistborn book. Terrifying, mysterious, dark, powerful, stern. All of the above apply to him, and just one of the better written antagonists I've ever seen. If we're looking for an antagonist that has like sort of a mystery surrounding them. And on top of that, he felt like he was just taken out of a horror movie and put into a fantasy novel. And I think it's harder than you think without like making it like this weird combination of genres. This isn't. This is just a straight fantasy. And yet, the antagonist feels more than just fantastical. And that is 24 different antagonists. Those are some of my favorites.